Welcome to The Kingstonian, a podcast that profiles people who are passionate about what they do for a living, what organization they belong to, or the community they are a part of. Here is your host, Dave Cunningham.
Thank you, Steve. Hello, everyone, and welcome. In this episode, the focus is on music. I speak with a choir director, not of singers, but of musicians. Musicians who can trace the origins of their instruments back to the 1600s. The instruments are handbells. The group is the Limestone Ringers, and our guest is Janet McDonald. Hello, Janet.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for being a part of the podcast.
My pleasure.
Just a reminder to our listeners, we are recording this podcast in late November 2022. So for those people who have no clue as to what a handbell is, describe it for us.
Well, I think the first thing that comes to your mind is the town crier. We have a very good one in Kingston who starts off, oh yeah, and I'm going to try this bell far away, which doesn't have the nicest sound, but I think because it's made out of the material that it is, it sounds very harsh. The bells that we use in Edith, Rankin are an alloy, 80% bronze and 20% tin, and it makes a nice, pleasant sound. And there's a certain way of ringing them. Of course, we are blessed in Edith, Rankin that we have 5 octaves of bells. So if you are familiar with a piano keyboard, you know the black and white keys on the keyboard. We have a handbell that goes with each note. And the nice thing about the handbells is that they are chromatically tuned. They do not go out of tune. They can be adjusted a little bit if needed, but they never go out of tune. So that's a blessing. So
if you are a musician, that would be a big thing.
It would.
Not having to tune a bell or your instrument.
That's right. It's a lot easier when you are transporting bells from one place to another. Not quite like a violin where you have to tune all the time. Mm-hmm. So we are thankful for that. They come in various sizes to correspond to the, I'm going to use the keyboard again, to the various notes. So if you have a little teeny bell, you're going to have a high-pitched note. If you have a big bell, it will be the lower end of the piano.
Where does this bell fit, the one that you just played for us?
The one I'm ringing is middle C.
Okay.
Now, if you know or don't know middle C, it's obviously in the middle of the keyboard. 88 keys.
Okay.
I just took the middle C just in case your listener can identify, middle C sounds like that. Mm-hmm. I didn't play it loudly, but the music that we use is very similar to piano music. If you look at a manuscript of a bell piece, it looks identical to a piano score, and you play it the same way. So if you are a bell ringer, you usually have 2 bells. It might be middle C and the note next to it. And every time those 2 notes come up in your piece, you play C and D. This is what's different from a choir, like a choral group compared with the bells. With a bell choir, you have one person with 2 bells, C and D, say. If that person does not appear that night, you don't have C and D, so there's a big empty spot in your piece. Mm-hmm. With a choir, you might have 5 sopranos or 5 altos and so on, so you don't have to worry. It's very crucial for a bell choir to have members who come regularly. And we are very blessed again with Edith Rankin Limestone Ringers that we have 15 ringers, more than we've ever had, and with 6 subs. Now the point of the subs is if Sally can't make it on Monday night, we call up Barbara. Barbara, can you come? And usually they're pretty good ringers that can jump in and play any bell. So that really keeps it afloat. We tend to play in church maybe once every 4 or 5 weeks, but in December we're playing every every Sunday. So it's crucial that everybody's there at every rehearsal, or you have to have your sub to fill in and make it perfect.
For those people who are not from Kingston, Edith Rankin Church is in Kingston, and this is your home base.
It is. Edith Rankin is in Collins Bay. A little history of Collins Bay. Why it's called Edith Rankin, I think she owned the property across the street, a big farm, and she donated the property for the church. And I guess maybe one of the stipulations was, call it after me. And it's a United Church, so the United Memorial part is, the memorial I think is after Edith Rankin.
I spent many a year in the basement of this particular church running scout groups for years and years and years. So it's a popular place in town.
It is, and it's in Collins Bay. I think I mentioned that, yeah.
You mentioned that this particular group has 15 people. So if we are talking about each of them having 2 bells, and the process of making music with those 15 people and the 30 bells is what? So they're playing in turn, or when you ask them to play as the director?
Well, they follow along the score, and they have their own bells, and so when their bell comes along, they play it. And there are different ways of playing a bell. If you have seen a bell choir, you have noticed that there are tables, but there are also pads on the tables. And the bells, for one of the techniques, goes, you touch the pad to save the bell. Otherwise, if you're cracking it around on the table, it won't last. But if you want to stop the sound, you can put it on the table. Or there's another one where you are kind of making a staccato sound. There's another one where you swing, you play the bell.
Creates a different effect.
Yeah, or there's another one, a gyration. You get all kinds of different sounds. We also have mallets, which are, pieces of plastic with a little ball on the end, usually knitted covering, or it can be a hard one, depending on what bell you're using, the padding or not. And that kind of makes a staccato sound. I didn't bring a mallet, but I could get one.
Yeah.
So there are different techniques for playing the bells. And you can play them loudly or quietly, a crescendo or a decrescendo or whatever. And of course, to be a bell ringer, you have to know music notation. You have to recognize the notes and sharps and flats and time signatures and general musical things that you learn in your first couple of years of piano or instrument of some sort.
Let's go back to the beginning, and I mentioned at the outset of the program that the origins of this instrument go back to the 1600s over in Great Britain.
That's right, they do. They started, I think you mentioned the name William Corr, in 1696 to 1724. They were developed in England, and then I think they crossed the ocean. If you'll notice with some of your Midsummer Murder programs, you might have change bell ringing, which is a bell in a steeple where you're pulling down
a long rope.
A lot of rope. I don't quite understand how that works, other than you pull on a rope and you get a bell sound. You have another thing called a carillon in the Peace Tower, which is more associated with a keyboard type of thing where you ring the bells. But the bells crossed over the ocean, and I think there are more bell choirs in the U.S. than in Canada.
Now, when I was reading this story of the bells, it seemed that at the beginning, every little town and village wanted to have some sort of bells. Now, I don't know where the transition was going from the bells that you pulled on long ropes in a steeple to the handbells, but it seems like they were gravitating more to the handbells because they were easier to manage, easier to deal with, and more people could participate than just pulling the bells at the end of a long cord inside a steeple.
I think that's probably true. And you don't have to have 5 octaves, which are 60 bells. You don't have to have that. There are many groups in Canada where you would just have 8 people, and they might have 2 bells each, would be 16 bells. Any number of people can play any number of bells. It's whatever you need to have, or you want to have, or required to have. Then we are lucky in Edith, Rankin. The bell choir, Limestone Ringers, started in 1985. A family in the congregation donated 3 octaves of bells, and so that started the 3 bells. And then after a few years, another family donated another 2, and kept on through donations from the congregation that we ended up with the 5 octave of bells, and also we have 3 octave of chimes, which are a little different than the bells. I can show you.
Now, are these bells expensive?
Yes, they are extremely expensive. If you had to replace a bell, some of the bigger ones are $50,000.
Really?
Yes, yeah. So we are very careful with our bells, and also to get them fixed, you're looking at $1,000 just to fix one little item. I think because it's so specialized, and they are created.
And there can't be too many repair shops around town.
None, as you might imagine. Yeah, we have to rely on somebody in Canada who does repairs. And it's usually only one person in Toronto or somewhere that repair. We haven't had many instances of repairing bells, but so we're lucky.
Now, for the longest time, the bells were produced in Great Britain, and from what I've read, it wasn't until the 60s that they started to get produced in the States.
Yes, I think you're right there. I'm not sure who brought them over or who started them, but that's probably why there are more bell choirs in the U.S. A lot of the churches have, a lot of bells, more so than we have. I think in Kingston there might be maybe one other church, and I think there is a bell choir in Glen Burnie with maybe 8 members. But Ottawa has, the larger cities are going to have more
Right.
bells. Toronto has probably the most, and
As you might expect.
Or big cities, yeah.
When you're playing the bell, inside the bell, there is a little doodad called the clapper, correct?
Yes. And
So in this particular case, the clapper is made of metal surrounded by rubber
yes.
or plastic or whatever that is?
Yeah, it's plastic, I believe. And it has to be facing the right way.
So when did they decide to put that muting rubber piece around the clapper?
I don't know.
Because otherwise it would be really harsh or loud.
Yes.
Right, if it was metal.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can imagine that the clapper's not turned the right way, and you wouldn't get the right sound. But if the clapper's facing the right direction, then you get the whole. Yeah. So another one of the techniques is called damping, where you either can stop the sound with your hands, with your body, or with the pad. So the reason for the damping is if you have a piece like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and that first note you have, if you don't damp it, then you'll have that note all through the Twinkle, Twinkle part. But so the many different techniques create different sounds. And
So if we are talking about giving someone a visual concept as to how this all works, so when you have
Right.
15 people standing at a table in front of their 2 bells, so when it's time for them to play a particular note, they would lift their bell off the table, make the note, and put the bell back down. They wouldn't sort of hold it in their hands.
that's right. And yes, and usually they would be ready to play and get ready. So the way you play a bell is like a backward C. Sorry, just a second. Rather than you can bang it like a hammer, but that gets difficult if you're playing more than 2 notes. I mean, you'd be banging, and it's more of a liquid backward C that gives the best sound. Yeah.
And you can imagine what that would sound like if you had 15 people playing a series of bells.
Yes. You would have a piece. Most of them, most of the churches have bell choirs, and most of the bell choirs play sacred music. But also that has changed a little bit. They can play movie music, or like we have done Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, which everybody knows and loves. That's written for bells or orchestrated for bells. So the tide is turning. I mean, the festival that we're going to talk about in a bit, one of the pieces is the syncopated clock. Now, it depends how liberal your church is.
Right.
You could get away with that. But if you have a very tight-knit, old-fashioned church, then you would play the old-fashioned music.
Now, let's talk a little bit about you. How did you get involved in bell ringing?
Well, I have a music history. Bore you with my history, which I started. I had a first cousin, who taught me piano, and she was an organist in a Presbyterian church in Sydney, Nova Scotia, and of course, I sang in the church choir and carried on and developed music, piano skills, and went to university and did a arts degree with a major in music, specifically piano, and then finished at Mount Allison with a BA. What do? You either perform or you teach. Well, I didn't quite make the performance part. My piano teacher thought I would make a good librarian. However, I didn't hold it against him. So I went to the University of Toronto and did a Bachelor of Music Education. So from piano only, I had to learn every instrument of the band, the orchestra, and choir, because you don't know where you're going to be placed, whether you're teaching in school that just has strings or whatever. I didn't do any of that. I promptly got married and went to California and stayed there for 3 years, and then moved back to Deep River, Ontario. My husband with Atomic Energy of Canada. He's a physicist and a Nobel Prize winner. I can put that in. So in Deep River, I carried on with, directing a choir and teaching piano. And then he got a tenured position at Princeton. So off we go to Princeton. And so I did a Master's of Choral Conducting at Westminster Choir College. And also at that time, I learned about a program for children called Kindermusik, which is basically enjoyment of singing, movement, little rhythm instruments, and so on, where parents come with their child and we make beautiful music together. So after Princeton, we moved to Kingston, and then I set up my own studio of Kindermusik and piano. And I directed the Pro Arty Singers. And it was about around that time that I may have picked up a bell. I'm not a bell ringer. I picked up a bell and just rang my 2 notes and got away with it. One of the people in the church said, well, there are a few people of these Limestone Ringers who want to do harder music at a faster pace. Would you like to direct this group? And I said, well, I have nothing. I have no bell knowledge. He said, you just need to wave your arms, which is basically what I do, wave my arms. So that's, and then the director before me passed away, and I took over probably in 2012 or 2013, I can't remember.
Was there a particular challenge that you saw with getting involved in bell ringing?
Apart from the fact that I did not know anything about bells, probably. Music is music, basically. All, the basics are the same, the notes, the dynamics, and all of that is the same. So I came into it that way, and I knew the people who were bell ringers, and I thought, well, they're bell ringers, they know what to do. I'll just wave my arms, which I did. But it was kind of nice because that group of 7 ringers, they played at my daughter's wedding in Deep River, and that was a real highlight for them. And for me and for my daughter. But gradually we stuck with both choirs, and then as people moved away, we just ended up with the Limestone Ringers, and that's where we are today with 15. We had 4 new people come from out of Kingston to join. One person, a young fella, came from Saskatchewan, and he's the youngest, and at that time the only male in our group. The average age of the choir is probably 65, something like that, but very dedicated people and musical, and we do have a lot of fun, and I think I can honestly say I think I found my niche. Choral directing perhaps wasn't one, but I think the directing the handbell choir is really, really fun.
And like you said before, if they are dedicated, they have to be, because if they're not there, then it's a big problem.
Yeah, and they're very, very conscious of that. I've probably made them conscious of that, saying if you can't come, you've got to find a ringer, you've got to find a sub. So they're all good with that, and we have, as I said before, 6 subs, so that works. And they're very dedicated. I mean, when we play in church, they have to be here ready to ring at 8:45. And sometimes after a Saturday night, that's kind of hard. But, no, they're very, very, very good people, and they put up with me.
We talked a little bit about the kind of music that bell-ringing choirs would play, most of it being sacred music if they're involved with a church.
Right.
At Edith, Rankin, what's the sort of mix that you see the group doing at this particular point?
Well, for instance, Sunday we are playing one of the festival pieces and then in December we'll be playing the Huron Carol, which is our only Canadian carol. I don't know if you knew that. And a Christmas Joy, which is a compilation of a couple of carols, and then O Come, Emmanuel, which is another familiar carol. So in December it'll be mostly carols, which is appropriate for Advent, I believe. In January we'll start with the festival pieces, which are mixed between, I don't know if it's sacred or generic, I suppose you could say, because choir leaders want to have stuff that's generic. And these are all new pieces. I don't think anybody has played them before. We have a clinician coming from the U.S. whose music we're using. But
now, when you talk about a song like Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, when you identify that as a song that the group wants to do, who writes the music for bells for that particular
It's already written.
Oh, it's okay, someone else has written it. Okay.
Yeah. We are doing one commissioned piece in the festival written by our former choir director and organist who passed away in January, or just recently. It's a compilation of 3 folk songs, 3 Canadian folk songs. So we are going to debut that at the festival, and it's being put together by a friend of Laurie Robotham is his name, and I think that'll be a fun piece to do, and so that'll be our debut of that.
You mentioned the festival earlier on, and this is something we want to talk about as well, because it's a festival that takes place every 2 years, I think, normally speaking.
Yes.
But because of COVID, it's now 4 years since the last one.
Yes, that's right.
And this is something that started back in 1985?
No, I think it started before then.
Okay.
The choir here, the Limestone Ringers, started in 1985. I wasn't here. I was still in Princeton at that point. It probably started before then. There's an organization for bell ringers called OGRE. Sounds lovely. Ontario Guild of English Handbell Ringers, OGHER. And they have been having festivals. There's been festivals in Kingston and London and Peterborough and Hamilton and so on. The last one we were in was in London, Fanshawe College, but this one is in Kingston, and the last Kingston one was in 1993.
So this is more like a convention rather than a competition?
Yes, it's a convention of ringers from Ontario and eastern Quebec. We're hoping to have 250 ringers. It varies from 250 to 400, depending on what's happening. Mm-hmm. We are slightly conscious of the fact that this will be the first time people will be together in a large room after COVID. And the age level, as I mentioned before, is that age level, which is the most risky, I guess. Mm-hmm. The festival is going to be at St. Lawrence College.
Okay. That was my next question.
Yeah, June 1st to 3, 2023. And it will be a nice campus because it's small and everything is accessible. And so there are residences for people out of town and dining facilities and workshop facilities and a marketplace where they sell things, and then a large gymnasium where we have our massed choir practices and also the final concert on Saturday, June 3rd.
So this would be, at the end of the event, this would be something like the massed bands at the Maxville Bagpipe Festival that takes place.
Yeah.
My wife being a bagpipe player, that's why
I love being Scottish 100%.
Everyone playing at the same time.
Yes. Now the difference is they're outside and we're not, but it'll be a large, a volume of sound for sure, and it should be exciting because people work together, and people haven't played together in 4 years, and it's great for those churches that have maybe 8 ringers who can come and play with other ringers from other choirs, and it's a nice association, and you have the residents to bond with and to party with, and believe it or not, old people party.
I believe you.
Right, so we're excited about that, and so far everything is good. Mm-hmm. It will, I suppose, depend on COVID, how that is happening, and we're kind of not thinking about that too much because it's been so long.
Fingers crossed. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes. Just one thing with our choir, with our Limestone Ringers, one of our ringers said, I would prefer to wear a mask because I teach high school, and I can be a cesspool of germs. So we all agreed. They all thought that was a great idea to be masked. So we are masked, even though the church says you don't have to be, but we all feel better because we're close together.
Yeah.
And sometimes sharing bells and so on. So it makes a lot of sense.
It does. Getting back to the choir here, some of the stuff you would do outside the church.
What we have done in the past, we played, I think it was, I know exactly when it was. It was 2015. We were asked to play with at the Christmas concert of the Kingston Symphony Orchestra. I remember it well because I just left Stockholm, like 6 a.m, and flew to be at a rehearsal for the choir and the orchestra that same day. And I remember it very well and was still awake. I think I was quite excited. So we did that.
Well, this was after the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to your husband.
I left Sweden to Kingston straight through. And so that was one of our big excitements. The other was playing at the final concert of Gordon Sinclair, who was a member here and who directed the Kingston Chamber Singers, or Kingston Chamber Choirs. He was retiring, and we were asked to perform at his final concert, so we did that. We have gone to different churches and on the outskirts of Kingston, playing Christmas music or just a little concert, but we don't do it regularly, but we will be doing it on December 11th at a retirement home here. So
something we talked about before we started recording was the fact that even though each person is carrying 2 bells, you still have to worry about the alignment of the tables and the padding underneath the tables, which makes it a little difficult for
Yes, fortunately we don't have
traveling.
To put them up and down every night. I think the tables that we now have are the regular Canadian Tire 6-foot and 8-foot table. So a lot of churches have that, and we just have to bring the pads and the skirts, which cover up a number of things. So it's a little easier, but we have to bring all the bells in cases. In fact, when we were in the midst of COVID and there was the church was closed, I was able to get access to the bells. And I belonged to the senior center, and I was a member at the senior center, so I thought, there's got to be a way to play bells. Mm-hmm. So I checked in the senior center, which is an old elementary school. They have large rooms. So we were able to practice because they were very good. They set up the tables and chairs, and they sanitized before and after. And we just brought the pads and the bells, and it worked. It was very good that people were able to come out, because I think we were pretty housebound at that time, 2 years ago. And we were able to perfect pieces. And I must say, whether it was excitement, exuberance, I should say, or what, we knocked off these pieces so they reached a certain perfection that we could record them and put them in the virtual service at Edith Rankin. And that was, I think that really, really helped everybody. So we were lucky. Now,
I want to thank you very much for sitting down and chatting and telling us all about the handbells.
You're
and
welcome.
Continued success with the group and all the things that you have planned, and for the festival itself in June.
Yes.
If people want more information about the group, where do they contact you? Do they contact?
Probably the simplest thing is either Edith Rankin Church, call up, or you can contact me as well. And
where would they contact you? Like an email address?
Probably an email if you want it.
Go ahead.
JANARTMCD@yahoo.ca.
Okay.
That's probably the easiest. Yeah.
Continued success with the group, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure to meet you.
And our guest in the program today has been Janet McDonald, who is the director of the Limestone Ringers, a handbell choir based in Kingston, Ontario. To those of you listening to the program today, thank you, and we'll talk soon.
The theme music for the podcast is Stasis Oasis, written and performed by Kingston musician Tim Aylesworth. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions about any of the episodes, please send a note to thekingstonianpodcast@gmail.com. For details on upcoming guests, follow us on Facebook. The Kingstonian Podcast is hosted by Dave Cunningham and produced in Kingston, Ontario, Canada.